The silk sheets, cool against his skin, once draped over a custom-made mattress, a minor detail in a sprawling mansion filled with priceless art and antique furniture. The morning light, gently filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminated a life of effortless luxury, a world where every desire was anticipated and fulfilled. Yet, today, the cold, hard ground beneath him offered no such comfort, the harsh glare of a street lamp his only illumination as he shivered, wrapped in a threadbare blanket. How does one transition from such unimaginable inherited wealth, a fortune so vast it defied comprehension, to the abject destitution of street life, an existence stripped bare of dignity and hope? This isn't a story of slow decline, but a cascade, a dramatic plunge from the pinnacle of privilege to the abyss of poverty, begging the question, how does one lose it all? Meet Arthur, a man whose birthright was a gilded cage, albeit one constructed from pure gold. He was born into a dynasty of old money, a lineage synonymous with power, influence, and a seemingly endless fortune that had accumulated over generations. From his first breath, Arthur was shielded from the harsh realities of the world, a delicate hothouse flower carefully cultivated in an environment designed to insulate him from anything resembling hardship. His upbringing was a tapestry woven with lavish private tutors, exclusive boarding schools in Switzerland, summers spent on private yachts cruising the Mediterranean, and winters in chalets nestled in the Alps. Responsibility was a concept he vaguely understood as something assigned to the myriad staff who catered to his every whim. His parents, well-meaning but ultimately indulgent, saw their role as providing the most exquisite life possible, believing that true education lay not in financial acumen or personal resilience, but in experiencing the finest things the world had to offer. Consequently, Arthur grew up with an unshakable belief in the inexhaustible nature of his family's wealth, a trust fund that seemed to replenish itself magically, a bottomless well from which he could draw without consequence. He never had to earn a penny, never had to budget, never had to comprehend the delicate balance between income and expenditure. Then, the world as Arthur knew it shattered with a sudden, brutal finality. A tragic, unforeseen accident claimed the lives of both his parents, leaving a void that was not only emotional but also profoundly practical. Overnight, Arthur, barely out of his 20s and completely unprepared, found himself as the sole heir to the vast family estate, a sprawling empire of holdings, investments, and capital. He was thrust into a position of immense power and responsibility, inheriting not just riches but a complex financial labyrinth, without any prior preparation or even the most basic understanding of financial management. The weight of centuries of accumulated wealth, once a comforting blanket, now felt like a crushing burden. Initial attempts by the family's long-standing advisors, a cadre of seasoned lawyers, accountants, and investment managers, to guide Arthur through the intricacies of his inheritance were met with a baffling cocktail of indifference, boredom, and outright dismissal. They tried to explain asset diversification, long-term growth strategies, and fiduciary duties, but their words seemed to bounce off Arthur like pebbles against a fortress wall. He saw his inheritance not as a sacred trust to be managed, nurtured, and grown for future generations, but as an inexhaustible resource, a giant ATM from which he could withdraw endlessly for immediate gratification. The concept of prudence was alien, foresight a foreign language. He was the king of his domain, and his domain was boundless. Before we delve deeper into Arthur's dramatic fall, the unraveling of a fortune that once seemed impervious to ruin, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. That way, you won't miss future stories of remarkable lives, their incredible highs, and their devastating lows. Arthur's spending escalated wildly, taking on a life of its own. He invested in a dizzying array of frivolous ventures, from a submersible luxury resort concept that defied engineering logic to a bespoke artisanal truffle farm in the arid desert, each project burning through capital at an alarming rate. His palatial estate became a revolving door for a lavish retinue of hangers-on, self-proclaimed artists, strategists, and spiritual gurus, all eager to bask in his reflected glory and, more importantly, his bottomless generosity. He embarked on increasingly extravagant personal projects, custom-built hypercars for every day of the week, a private orchestra to perform his favorite obscure classical pieces on demand, entire wings added to properties he barely visited. Financial oversight was a foreign concept, dismissed with a wave of his hand and a casual, money is merely a tool for enjoyment, not a burden for scrutiny. The true antagonist in this unfolding tragedy wasn't a single Machiavellian figure but a corrosive combination of Arthur's own profound naivete, his burgeoning hubris, and the insidious influence of this burgeoning court of sycophants. They were masters of gentle manipulation, experts at whispering promises of quick, impossible returns and endless, effortless pleasure into his impressionable ear. "Your vision is simply ahead of its time, Arthur," they'd coo, urging him to pour more funds into a holographic pet project or a digital currency that promised overnight riches. "Only a man of your unique genius could see the true potential." These voices, subtly yet consistently, encouraged his destructive habits, painting prudence as pessimism and caution as cowardice. They fed his ego, validating every impulsive decision, inadvertently accelerating his descent. The escalating losses became more and more frequent, each one a tremor before the earthquake. The submersible resort, predictably, never left the drawing board, drowning millions in feasibility studies and unrecoverable deposits. The desert truffle farm yielded nothing but dust and debt. Properties, once pristine jewels in the family portfolio, were mismanaged by unqualified friends Arthur had appointed to lucrative positions, their values plummeting as maintenance was neglected and tenants fled. Capital, once seemingly inexhaustible, was squandered on increasingly audacious but ultimately worthless endeavors, each failure met not with introspection, but with renewed determination to invest more in the next big thing. The seasoned family advisors, men and women who had safeguarded the fortune for generations, grew increasingly frantic. Their urgent warnings and meticulously prepared financial reports were met with Arthur's icy dismissal. He saw their concerns as quaint, their caution as a lack of imagination, their experience as an outdated relic. "You simply don't understand the new economy," he would declare, echoing the glib confidence of his new inner circle. "Innovation requires risk, and I am not afraid to take it." As his financial situation deteriorated, so too did his personal relationships. Genuine friends, those who had known him since childhood and seen the good man beneath the gilded exterior, tried desperately to intervene. Concerned relatives, bearing the weight of family legacy, approached him with pleas for rationality. But Arthur, now almost completely insulated by his circle of enablers, pushed them all away. Their honesty felt like an impediment to his grand designs, their concern an unwelcome judgment. He preferred the company of those who validated his extravagant lifestyle, who applauded his every whim, who never dared to question his judgment. He became increasingly isolated from those who truly cared for him, retreating further into a world of superficial adoration and fleeting pleasures. The illusion finally began to truly crumble with the spectacular collapse of Etheria, his ambitious virtual reality theme park. It was meant to revolutionize entertainment, but instead, it became a black hole, sucking down well over $100 million before its technological foundation proved non-existent and its development team vanished with a significant portion of the remaining funds. This was the first major financial setback that even Arthur couldn't entirely ignore. It left a colossal, undeniable dent in his once limitless fortune, a chasm in the balance sheets that even his most creative accountants couldn't hide. Yet, remarkably, Arthur remained in a state of profound denial, convinced it was merely a temporary setback, a slight miscalculation on the road to ultimate triumph. The true cost of his fantasy was still just beyond his comprehension. The illusion of endless prosperity shattered with brutal finality. A series of disastrous, high-stakes investments, egged on by the very sycophants who had benefited from his largesse, imploded simultaneously. A particularly audacious venture, a lavish resort in a volatile foreign market, collapsed amidst political instability and rampant corruption, taking with it the last significant chunk of Arthur's liquid assets. Then came the creditors, a relentless tide of demands, lawsuits, and legal notices that could no longer be ignored or appeased. The family advisors, their faces etched with despair, presented him with the grim truth: the fortune was gone. Every last penny. The final, humiliating blow was the forced sale of the ancestral estate, the sprawling manor and its manicured grounds, generations of history auctioned off piece by piece to satisfy insatiable debts. Arthur stood on the gravel drive, watching as strangers carted away the antique furniture, the priceless art, the very essence of his lineage. He was stripped bare, not just of his possessions, but of the very identity he had inherited, the title of Fortune's favorite child, now a bitter, ironic jest. The gates clanged shut behind him, sealing off his past forever, leaving him utterly destitute, without a penny to his name or a roof over his head. He found himself wandering the city streets, a ghost in his own former kingdom. The opulent restaurants, exclusive clubs, and designer boutiques he once frequented now seemed to mock his threadbare appearance. He drifted, propelled by an aimless despair, until he collapsed onto a park bench, the cold metal a stark contrast to the silken upholstery he was accustomed to. As the last embers of daylight faded, casting long, melancholic shadows, a profound moment of clarity pierced through the fog of his self-pity. Here, amidst the rustling leaves and passing strangers, Arthur finally saw the truth. The faces of his former associates, once so charming and solicitous, now appeared as vultures, their smiles predatory, their advice poison. He remembered the genuinely worried expressions of his family advisers, the earnest pleas of his true friends, all dismissed with a wave of his hand. He had chased fleeting pleasures and hollow flattery, sacrificing real connection and invaluable wisdom on the altar of his own unchecked ego and naive belief in inexhaustibility. The weight of his irresponsibility, the crushing realization of how much he had squandered, settled heavily upon him. It wasn't just money he had lost, it was respect, trust, and years of potential growth. The dawn brought with it a fragile but resolute determination. Arthur, for the first time in his life, sought employment, not as a diversion, but as a necessity. He began with menial tasks, sweeping floors, washing dishes, accepting the harsh reality of earning an honest wage. The physical labor was grueling, the hours long, but with each blister and aching muscle, a sense of purpose slowly began to bloom. He reconnected with an old family friend, a distant cousin he had once scorned for their modest means, who offered him a small, humble room and a steady, if demanding, job in their struggling local business. There were no grand pronouncements, no sudden epiphanies that transformed him overnight, but a slow, arduous process of rebuilding, brick by painstaking brick. He learned the value of a dollar earned, the dignity of hard work, and the quiet satisfaction of contributing. Years passed. Arthur, now older and visibly weathered, bore little resemblance to the pampered heir he once was. He still worked hard, his hands calloused, his back often sore, but his eyes held a depth and wisdom they never possessed before. He had found a new, quiet life, one built on genuine relationships and the integrity of honest labor. The vast fortune was a distant memory, a cautionary tale he rarely spoke of. He had lost everything material, but in the crucible of his downfall, he had forged something infinitely more valuable, his own self-worth, earned not inherited, and a profound understanding that true richness lay not in accumulated wealth, but in a life lived with purpose, humility, and authentic connection. Thank you for watching this powerful story of fortune gained and lost. If you were moved by Arthur's journey, please like this video and share it with someone who might appreciate its message. And for more compelling narratives, remember to subscribe and check out our next video linked here.